I couldn't believe my eyes. 6 months ago, I left my 50-acre farm in the care of my cousin while I handled a family emergency overseas. I had trusted her to keep things running smoothly, knowing she had always been responsible and dependable. Yet, as I stood at the edge of my property, the sight that greeted me sent a chill down my spine. Where once the gentle slopes of green fields and scattered trees had stretched out before me, there was now a towering 3-story hotel, complete with a parking lot, neon signs flashing Grand Valley Suites, and luxury vehicles parked in front. My blood boiled. Every ounce of trust one had placed in my cousin seemed to evaporate in an instant. How could she have let this happen? I had left with the assumption that everything would be fine. But even as the anger surged within me, my thoughts quickly turned darker. The HOA. They had to be the ones behind this. They were the only ones who had always resented my farm. For years, my property had been the last remaining patch of untamed land in the otherwise pristine suburban neighborhood. I had always been the outlier. The farmhouse, with its rustic charm, stood in stark contrast to the cookie-cutter houses surrounding it. The HOA had made no secret of their disdain for my land. At first, it was subtle complaints, muttering about how my fields were unsightly or how my barn didn't match the neighborhood aesthetic. But when that didn't work, they turned to more aggressive tactics, fines for every little thing. My grass grew a little too tall? A fine. The paint on my barn peeled slightly? A fine. They even tried to claim that my land wasn't zoned for agricultural use, although they knew full well it had been for over a century. But I had never taken their threats seriously. I wasn't one to bow to pressure. I had no plans of leaving my land, and I certainly wasn't going to let them dictate how I ran my property. What they didn't know was that I had anticipated their next move. I had set a trap long before I left for my family emergency. It had all started a year ago, when I caught wind of their plans to rezone the area around my farm. A little digging revealed that the HOA had been working with developers to build a large commercial complex on what they had hoped would be my land. It wasn't just talk. They had already started buying up neighboring plots, systematically encroaching on the open spaces surrounding my farm. The idea was to turn my slice of countryside into a luxury resort, erasing any trace of my farm for good. I knew that if I wanted to stop them, I'd have to be more clever than they expected. So, I began making arrangements behind the scenes. First, I hired a lawyer, one with deep ties to local zoning boards and an extensive history of protecting landowners from predatory developers. Then, I made sure my cousin, who had no clue about my suspicions, was kept out of the loop entirely. I had arranged for a trusted neighbor to keep an eye on things while I was gone. But it didn't stop there. I had been preparing for this moment for months. Knowing the HOA's next move would be to push through zoning changes, I made sure to have a few legal surprises up my sleeve. I had documents prepared, including an official request for a historical landmark designation for my farm. This would make it nearly impossible to redevelop without a long, expensive process. I had also taken the precaution of installing security cameras around the perimeter of my property, capturing any unauthorized activities. Now, standing at the edge of my farm, I realized the HOA had played right into my hands. I could see their smug expressions as they watched from their offices in the new hotel. They thought they had won, until they realized I had already filed the paperwork to stop them in their tracks. The battle wasn't over yet. Far from it. But now, I had the upper hand, and I wasn't going to let them destroy my land without a fight. I had one thing they didn't: the truth on my side. And in the end, that was all I needed to expose their corruption and restore peace to my farm. The war was just beginning. The moment I got back, I stormed into the HOA office, my fists clenched and my blood boiling. The familiar scent of freshly printed notices and the hum of fluorescent lights felt oppressive as I made my way toward the front desk. The receptionist gave me a hesitant look but quickly stepped aside when she saw the fire in my eyes. Richard Caldwell, the HOA president, was sitting behind his desk, reviewing some paperwork. His bald head gleamed under the harsh lighting, and a smug smirk crept across his face as he saw me enter. It was the kind of smirk someone wears when they think they've already won. "Ah, Mr. Carter. We assumed you'd abandoned the property," he said in his usual condescending tone. "Since it was an eyesore, we thought it best to repurpose it for the community's benefit. A hotel, you know, something to elevate the neighborhood's appeal. My hands clenched at my sides, the frustration boiling inside me. You built a hotel on my land without my permission. Richard leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the tension. Oh, Mr. Carter, please. You've been gone for months, and there was no communication from you. The property was clearly abandoned. We simply filed a claim under abandoned property laws. It's all perfectly legal. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Abandoned property? I repeated, my voice rising with disbelief. You didn't even bother to check the county records, did you? Richard's smirk faltered just slightly, and I could see the first crack in his facade. He wasn't prepared for my response. The moment I said it, I knew he was realizing his mistake. He leaned forward, trying to mask the uncertainty in his eyes, but it was too late. I kept up all my property taxes, Richard. I kept the title in my name, and I made sure that everything was legally in order before I left for my family emergency. All my communications were updated, and I filed a notice of temporary absence with the county records office. You could have found all of that if you'd bothered to check, but clearly you didn't. Or maybe you just hoped I wouldn't come back, didn't you? He straightened his back, trying to regain control of the situation. That's irrelevant. The hotel is already built. You're too late, Mr. Carter. We've followed the proper procedures, and the new development has been approved by the city council. I shook my head slowly, my jaw tightening. The procedures are about to be questioned. You don't get to play fast and loose with the law because you think I wasn't paying attention. You've been planning this for months, Richard. I've already filed my own claims, and I've got an entire legal team ready to take this to court. Richard's face drained of color. What claims? What are you talking about? I leaned in, locking eyes with him. I've already filed a request for my farm to be designated as a historical landmark. The process has already begun. Once that's granted, you can kiss that hotel goodbye. His eyes narrowed, but I could see the fear creeping in. I had him. He knew it, and now I had the upper hand. Historical landmark, he stammered. That's absurd. You can't. I can, I interrupted. And I will. You didn't think I would just let you bulldoze my land and get away with it, did you? The fact that you chose to ignore the legal steps I'd taken and built a hotel on land that's been in my family for generations. Well, now you're going to pay for it. Richard's confident demeanor was quickly unraveling. He opened his mouth to protest, but I wasn't done. You might have thought I was out of the picture, but the moment I stepped back onto my land, I made sure the battle was just beginning. I've got documents, I've got witnesses, and I've got the law on my side. This hotel is going to be torn down, and you'll be the one left explaining how you broke the law to every resident who thought you were acting in their best interests. Richard stood up abruptly, slamming his palms onto the desk. You can't do this, he shouted, his voice cracking. I already am. I turned on my heel and walked out, my heart pounding with the satisfaction of knowing that the fight had only just begun. I wasn't going to let them erase my family's legacy. Not now, not ever. Before leaving for my family emergency, I'd made sure to do 3 very smart things. I wasn't going to let the HOA get the best of me, and I knew that the moment I stepped away, they would seize the opportunity to try something shady. So, I took measures to protect my property. First, I leased the land to a Trusted Friends LLC for agricultural research with a 100-year clause. The lease was airtight, a document that would make it nearly impossible for anyone to argue against its legitimacy. The terms were clear. The land would remain in agricultural use, and the lease would be active regardless of any changes in ownership or claims to the property. That would ensure no one could simply swoop in and take it without facing serious legal consequences. Second, I recorded every conversation with the HOA, every single phone call, every meeting, every complaint they ever made about my farm. I had the receipts for their threats to seize my land, their whispers about turning it into a commercial property, and all the emails where they tried to intimidate me into selling. Those recordings weren't just for show. They were the evidence I would need to hold them accountable when the time came. And third, I installed hidden cameras around the perimeter of my farm, tucked away in inconspicuous places, capturing every moment. It wasn't just paranoia, it was insurance. The cameras would give me proof of anything and everything that happened on my land in my absence. I was particularly interested in capturing any attempts to damage my property, and it didn't take long before they obliged. The day after I left, construction crews were caught on tape tearing down my fences, clearly marking their intent to ignore any and all boundaries. I wasn't just dealing with legal loopholes anymore. I had them caught red-handed. Now, standing in the HOA office with Richard Caldwell's smug face still fresh in my mind, I dropped a thick folder onto his desk. It landed with a heavy thud, the contents shifting slightly inside. Richard's eyes flickered down to the folder and back up at me, his confidence momentarily faltering. "I thought you might need a little help understanding the situation," I said, my voice icy calm. "You trespassed on my property, destroyed my fences, and ignored an active lease. That's fraud, theft, and illegal construction. And I've got the proof." Richard's pale face told me everything I needed to know. His cocky posture slumped just a little, and his eyes darted to the folder as if it might suddenly spring to life and bite him. The air between us was thick with tension, and for the first time since I walked in, I could see the fear in his eyes. "You think you can just throw a few papers at me and that's going to stop everything?" he finally stammered, trying to regain some composure, but his voice lacked the usual bravado. "You can't just file some random complaints and expect things to go your way." "I don't think you understand the gravity of what you've done," I replied, taking a step forward, my voice steady and menacing. "You've illegally destroyed my property. You've ignored the fact that I legally leased it to someone else. And you did it all while operating under the false belief